Ladies and gentlemen, let's game into video. We're going to be talking about a patent that Nintendo have filed, actually a couple of patents that they've filed, and a lot of folks on the internet are doing the obvious thing, saying 2 plus 2 together equals Nintendo NX. Now, I'd love to include the images for these patents in this video, but you all know that Nintendo plus images are a little funny together, so instead I'm including a link to NeoGAF, which you can check out in the video's description. But let's talk about this, shall we? Because there are a myriad of these patents, but I'm going to give you a summary first. Infrared camera and distance sensor, gesture recognition, distance measurements, and another example includes both a projector, and GPS receiver. Now these various patents appear at various different times. For example, one of them was filed in the United States on 07/15/2015, but was published just March this year. And it's quite interesting because a lot of folks are therefore making the logical leap. Well, if you start talking about gesture tracking, gesture recognition and distance measurements and that type of stuff, doesn't that sound an awful lot like Kinect? And one can argue that yes, it does. Now, before we go any further into any analysis with this, I'd like to point out the most obvious point possible. It doesn't necessarily equal to NX. It really is tempting to say, well, this is a potential controlling device, and the figures that you're seeing look an awful lot like, let's say, the Wii U controller. But the reality of the situation is that it doesn't necessarily equate to that. It could be a project that Nintendo are working on but isn't necessarily related to the NX, or it could be a side project of the NX, for example, a peripheral of some such, which isn't necessarily normally part of the control pad. Think of it like the original Xbox 360's Kinect. Or it could be a project that maybe Nintendo are working on but doesn't really have a use at the moment. They just think the technology is promising, and therefore they're saying, yeah, we're going to keep working on this and maybe see where this goes. And, well, Nintendo do that all the time. They often come up with these zany patents or these zany game ideas, and it's not necessarily that they're doing it, with no aim in mind, but they're just simply experimenting. They're just seeing, what happens if we go down this path. Does it lead to something fun? Does it lead to something we can actually use? And it's actually kind of crazy because, for example, on the screen, it might give you a mathematics problem. So, for example, it might be something along the lines of the example they're using anyway, is 1 plus 4 equals, and then you simply raise your number of fingers for the answer. So obviously in this case you put 5 fingers up, in other words you're giving the hi there, wave of the hand, and it will show, yeah, that's correct. On the other hand, if you were to do the same gesture but it was going to show 1 plus 1 and you were to show 5 fingers, obviously this would read as incorrect. Even in the case of the projector, it's really bizarre because it's essentially projecting an image onto your hand. So, for example, it might be that it projects an image of a ball. Let's say you're playing baseball, and then you can throw that, and then obviously that ball will appear on screen. And because obviously it's able to calculate, let's say, the distance you're throwing, the speed, the acceleration, and all that bollocks, essentially you can start playing baseball with this thing. Now, I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Obviously, this is one of those things where it can go either way, and by which I mean, back in the day I was never really sold with the Wiimote. I actually really hated the idea, and I played it, and I didn't hate it as much when I played the actual system and I finally got around to using the Wii, and I was actually kind of surprised how well some games actually lended themselves to that control method. With that said, if I had the option, I would have just wanted still the Wii to have standardized controls. I realise that that's not to everyone's taste. I know some people absolutely love those controls and that's all fine. Me, not so much. But with something like this, it has some kind of interesting applications. I mean, I just wonder about the image quality. I wonder how well it actually works in terms of reality. Unfortunately, we don't know enough about whether this is going to be for the NX. It could be for the handheld portion of the NX. It could be whatever the hell that ends up being called. Let's just say the new 3DS or the new Game Boy, whatever you want to call it. Could be it's going to be part and parcel of the NX for only certain titles, maybe educational titles, that type of thing. We just don't know. And it would be interesting also, what the hell is this going to do to the pricing of the peripherals or the system? Now, from what we do know about the system, the main thing is that supposedly it's fairly impressive hardware-wise. Fairly impressive, of course, is a bit ambiguous. We've heard everything from the fact that it's really impressive down to the fact that it's around the same performance of the Xbox One/PS4. It's between those. So I'm not really sure, because some developers have said it's comparable to a high-spec PC, and others once again have said it's about the same as the Xbox One, which is obviously not comparable to a high-spec PC. So your guess is as good as mine. Kind of interesting though, at least in my opinion. I'm cautiously optimistic about the NX. Personally, I don't really care if it's got funky control methods, as long as I can use a decent, smart control method for the games I want to play. The big one for me is that the games, and I've said this before in a podcast just a while back, it has to have a really good lineup. I don't want a new Zelda, let's say for the sake of argument, the same version that's on the Wii U. It might have a few changes, let's say improved graphics, that type of crap. And I don't want just that, plus a couple of other launch games. I want a really strong lineup. I want a game at launch, I want another game a couple of months afterwards, I want another game like a month after that, and by which, what I mean by that is really big exclusive titles. I want the equivalents of the Metroids, I want the equivalents of the Marios, of the Luigi's Mansions, of the, Star Foxes, and obviously I'm just giving some examples. Nintendo have hundreds of really good IPs that they could potentially be leveraging, bringing back, or what have you. But, some really good exclusives. They could be buying some. I mean, we've heard rumours that they're going to be doing that. And I think that could be kind of cool. So, cautious, but optimistic. That's how I'm looking at the NX. But for now, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you could do the likey, subscribe, share everything, I'd greatly appreciate it. But for now, take care. Have a good day.